Biliyor musun? Erken rezervasyon başladı. Yazın en renkli fırsatları CyprusParadise.com'da. %40, %50 hatta %60'a varan kaçırılmaz indirimler. Erken rezervasyon yap, uçak bileti fiyatına paket tatili al. Uygun fiyata Kıbrıs tatilinin adresi CyprusParadise.com. Zaman akıp gitmeden acele edin. Bir bakmışsınız yaz gelmiş. Cyprus Paradise. Tatiliniz bizimle güvende.
Kalitenin, güvenin, hızlı teslimatın adresi Ancon Furniture. Ancon Furniture ailesi olarak yeni ürünler ile hizmete devam etmekteyiz. Yeni model koltuk takımlarımız, yatak mekanizmaları bir dokunuş ile açılıp bir dokunuş ile kapanabilmektedir. Bir dokunuş ile açtığımız yatak mekanizmasının yatak çarşafı kullanıma hazır, serili olarak içinden çıkmaktadır. Yıl sonuna kadar herhangi bir koltuk takımı alan her müşterimize akıllı sehpa hediyemizdir. En iyi ürün, en iyi fiyat. Sadece Ancon Furniture'da. Bize uğramadan karar vermeyin. En iyisini biz yapana kadar daha iyisi yok.
Welcome to the latest printed press. I'm Aysen Djemal, and tonight we have a very special program on gender equality. And we have, wow, an amazing lineup of women tonight. I'm ever so excited about tonight's program. We've got Soraya, Misiri, who is a psychotherapist, who's also come on my program before. Welcome, Soraya, to my program again. We have Dr. Fulya Yahioglu, a senior public health commissioner, normally on my program quite a lot about COVID-19. Thank you very much. And a local celebrity now, I think, Dr. Fulya, with all the advice that you've given everybody of late. Gulfidan Dervish, Executive Assistant, TCCA Trustee, TCCA Sub-Women's Group Leader, and TTFF Women's Committee, and also a dear friend of mine, Gulfidan. Welcome to my program. Thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you.
And Baletti, who is also a dear friend of mine, Electric Vehicles Senior Manager, Strategy for EDF Energy. Welcome, Ren, to my program.
Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. And Emine Osman, KibrisWorldWide admin, a dear friend of ours who's always sharing our programs and supporting us. It's so great to have you on our program as well, Emine. Thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you.
It's absolutely a pleasure. I mean, I'm so excited tonight because truly what we're going to discuss tonight is something that's been much needed, especially in our community. So before we get on to the actual subject, if it's okay, if we go around the table and just give our viewers a little bit of background and knowledge about who we are and what we do. If we start with you, Soraya, if you could just introduce yourself to our audiences. I know you've been on our program before.
Yeah, I have been on your program before, and thanks for having me again. Yeah, I'm a psychotherapist, qualified, and have been working in private practice for the last 15 years. So,
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And we had such a long conversation yesterday as well. So we're going to be doing a lot more programs, definitely, because your knowledge is just amazing. So we need to share it with our audiences, really. Dr. Fulya, again, it's a pleasure. Like I said, you've become a local celebrity, I think, because you're so knowledgeable and putting people straight with the facts.
Not at all, not at all.
Give us a little bit of background knowledge as to who you are and what you do.
Well, thank you. And thank you, ladies. It's a pleasure to be on this program with these wonderful, inspiring women. Just to say, yes, I work in public health Enfield. I'm a senior commissioner. I commission 2 clinical services with 2 large NHS trusts. I work with GPs, pharmacists, and I'm an ex-scientist. I hold a PhD in pharmaceutical chemistry and a degree in molecular biology and biophysics. So my background previously was as a scientist. Then I moved away and I've been working in health for the last 18 years.
Amazing. I mean, it just fills me with pride just listening to your title, let alone the wealth of knowledge that you have. It's just amazing. Emine, Osman, always in the background, working very, very hard for us. I'm so happy to have you in the front line tonight. It's such an honor for me to have you on our program. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I'm obviously one of the admins on KibrisWorldWide, which is a community group for obviously Turkish Cypriots and other communities as well. I'm also a housing officer for a housing association, so that's my real job, my day job. But obviously working on the group that we have, it's a platform for everyone to come together. Obviously during COVID, it's been really helpful and useful, to have somewhere that people can voice their fears or just have a chat, just say hello to each other, and just to know that they're not on their own. So, that's why we obviously formed our group.
Yeah, it was much needed, I think, especially during these COVID times. Honestly, bless you for everything that you do. I think you've really made a difference. Like you said, brought the community together. We need these groups. I think it's much needed. So thank you very much for all the hard work that you do. And housing officer, that's interesting. Now that I know that, you're going to come on the program and talk about housing. That's a huge subject. So that's it now.
A whole nother show.
Ren, a dear friend of mine, mentored my son, such an educated lady. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and what you do?
Thank you, that's sweet. So I'm a chartered accountant by, when I first started work. I've been involved in strategy across various companies since, looking at how better competitive they can be, how they can grow their profits, optimize their costs. And more recently, I've been working in the energy space, where I've been looking to expand the company into electric vehicles, because that's the new kind of favorite thing at the moment. So it's been a huge, exciting last 2 years that I've been working on that, and how, the company can really expand on their electric vehicle tariffs and on their EVs. So anyone needs any advice, come over to me. But I think more importantly, during COVID, I've really tried hard to help, I guess, befriend some of the elderly, but also progression mentoring with the Prince's Trust as well, with a few people that have really struggled to get roles this year. And, as Emine was saying, I think it's really important during this time to try and do those extracurricular activities, because, some people have really been struggling during this time, and you should be doing more than just, your day job, really, which, everyone seems to be doing. So that's really fantastic.
Yeah, for sure, Ren. I mean, I know that you've been helping the community a lot in the background. So it's really nice to have you on my program so we can actually discuss it, because, I've wanted you on the program for a very long time.
Aww.
And yeah, definitely all the advice for the energy and everything, and, specifically in your field, would be very, very useful. So again, another program in the making. Gulfidan, we've worked alongside each other for the TCCA, and we're also part of the Football Federation sort of women's arm. You're a very powerful woman, I tell you, and very proud to have you again on my program. You've been on it before. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and what you do?
Yeah, sure. So professionally, I'm an executive assistant. I'm one of the trustees for TCCA. And then, we'll be heading the sub-women's group soon for TCCA as well. And then, the Football Federation women's group as well.
Yeah, all really powerful, inspirational, and busy ladies. But we're going to start with the subject that we have claimed that we're going to talk about today, which is about gender equality. Now, first of all, Fulya, if you could just start with a basic question, which is, what is gender equality? Oh, we can't hear you. The sound's gone. Still can't hear you. What's happened to the sound?
Apologies.
That's it. You're back.
I'm back. Apologies.
Okay.
Technical issues. Yeah, I mean, I was debating on what to put around gender equality. I found a quote which I thought was quite apt, and then I'll go into what we mean by gender equality. And this is from the Director General from the International Labour Organization. And he's quoted as saying, humanity can only be at its best when gender equality becomes a reality for all, everywhere. We must and we will make it happen. Let us invest in women as part of a human-centered recovery. I thought that kind of summed up what gender equality, and particularly around women and gender equality, was. It's a fundamental human right and is a necessary foundation for a peaceful, prosperous, and sustainable world. Societies that value women and men are equal, are safer, and healthier. Now, from my own experience, I suppose gender equality, I was one of the lucky ones that I was able to go to university. I was able to live away from home. I was able to be independent, both socially and economically. And that, I think, is what we're striving towards as women. And I know a lot of my counterparts, I mean, I'm going back 30 years. It was very difficult to get away to university. You couldn't move. You had to be living at home and go to university. I was lucky that my parents were very kind of modern thinking, and I allowed both myself and my brother to go away to university, allowed me to get into education, allowed me to choose what I wanted to do rather than set boundaries. So I was one of the lucky ones. So in terms of gender equality, I think gender equality means that all genders are free to pursue whatever career, lifestyle choices, abilities they want without discrimination. These rights, opportunities, responsibilities, and access to society are not based around their gender. So in effect, we're saying every woman should have the freedom, choice, and capacity to do whatever she wants and be empowered to do so. So you could be a CEO, a footballer, a scientist, engineer, entrepreneur, etc. Also, gender equality, I think, means that, you know, we need to promote economic independence for men and women, but particularly for women. We must close the gender pay gap, and we must advance gender balancing in decision making. So we need to ensure that women have a right to make their own decisions, but also influence other decision making processes. And obviously, one of the key things I suppose relates to is around ending gender-based violence and promoting gender across all sectors. So be it sports, science, medicine, industry, finance, or engineering. So I suppose the question is, why are we talking about gender equality, particularly now? And I would say that comes on the light of Sarah Everard case, which is pretty well known at the moment, but also the lesser known Nicole Smallman and Bibba Henry case, the two young Black women who were all killed through gender-based violence. And secondly, the impact of COVID. The coronavirus outbreak has exacerbated existing health inequalities for women and girls across every sphere, from health and the economy to security and society, rolling back on the hard-won achievements that we've had in the number of years. So women have been educated, women have been independent, etc. And I think COVID has had a massive impact. I mean, I can give you a few stats. So how has it impacted on gender equality? Well, we've had a recorded surge in domestic violence across the UK as well as Europe. We've seen about 30% increase in domestic violence reports in UK, 32% in France, and a 5-fold increase in Ireland. Women have been dramatically affected on the front line tackling the pandemic. So 76% of healthcare and social care workers, 86% of personal care workers in the health services are women. So we've got a high proportion of women in those sectors. With the pandemic, women in these sectors have been affected greatly by having an unprecedented rise in workload, health risks, and challenges to their work-life balance. Also, the women in the labour market have been hit dramatically by the pandemic because they're overrepresented in sectors affected by the crisis: retail, hospitality, care, domestic work, as these are jobs that cannot be done remotely. Also, I think lockdown has had a significant impact on unpaid care and work-life balance. Women spend on average 62 hours per week caring for children compared to 36 hours for men, and 23 hours per week doing housework compared to 15 hours for men. So there's a difference there for a start. And then we've got the striking lack of women in the COVID-19 decision-making bodies. 2020 study found that men greatly outnumber women in the bodies created to respond to the pandemic. Of the 115 national dedicated COVID-19 task forces, only in the 87 countries and within the 17 member states, 85% were made up of men and only 11% comprised of women, and 3.5% had gender parity. So we know that there are differences, and these are things that we need to address. And at our political level, only 30% of health ministers in the EU are women. Women continue to be underrepresented at all levels of political leadership. So I think it's important that people understand the facts and to know that currently the pandemic has affected women in more ways than one. The pandemic has affected all of us, but I think in terms of gender equality, it really has had a significant impact on women and the work that women do. So I think it's important that we try and address that gap through gender equality policies, and to ensure that within our community, within our work, within our lifestyles, that we try and empower women, empower young girls to achieve anything that they want to do, and to kind of minimize the impact of, minimize the impact of, what's happening with COVID, to try and increase the women into employment, etc., women into education, etc.
Yes, most definitely. It's true. It sounds so easy, doesn't it? But when you actually go into the facts and figures, there are lots of gaps there with the gender pay gap. And also the fact that, women still have the main role when it comes to the household and the running of things. So although we're encouraging women to go out there and work, we're not making, the workload at home more equal, really. It's like an added on pressure, and I think that's a really important point that you made. So really, I think, Fulya, you telling us the facts and figures and how COVID has affected the women is very, very educational and informative for our audiences, so they understand why it is that we are currently talking about this. And we're obviously going to go into a few things as well later on in the programme as to what's happened to certain individuals in the news and what effect that's had. Gul, hopefully you can hear us. I think, yeah, brilliant.
I can hear.
Obviously, from a sports perspective, because that's like your specialism, as physically, men and women are different, right? How can there be equality then in sports? Surely women and men could not perform in the same leagues. What is your thoughts about that idea?
It's a tough one. It's definitely a tough one. I mean, I used to play football, and I used to have to play with the boys at school and compete with them because of the lack of female football players. So in one aspect, yes, we should be allowed to play in the same league, same team. However, science prevents that, I guess. I think that before that we can discuss things like playing in the same teams and leagues and things like that, we need to address really the issues that female athletes are facing these days, which is more on equality on pay. So I think that they're really unfairly done with regards to sponsorship and endorsement. And then once things like that are more sort of equalized, then obviously the competition then obviously becomes a little bit fairer. But once obviously women athletes are sponsored and endorsed, then that then determines their value as an athlete, then determines the business potential. And then of course then female athletes can fill stadiums and have a little bit more media coverage, which then gives them a little bit more value. So I think they're undervalued in that aspect. and that's the problem that female athletes face today.
Yes, I agree. It's not so much how they compete, but how much they're valued. I totally agree with that. Before we move on, there is a few comments that I just want to say in between the questions, so the audience don't think they're being ignored, because there's a few men out there that have made some comments, and I just want to clarify some of that. Metin has put, as long as men make the rules and control power in government and religion, women will be underrepresented and we will never see equality, which is very true. This is a point that Fulya made, and it's very important that we put women in the forefront. This is the reason why I feel very passionate about doing programs like this and allowing our community to see strong, powerful women in places, in positions of authority, because that's the only way we can have true representation. Abi Hussein has then gone on and said, please don't forget there is single fathers out there, 100%. It's not that we're doing away with what men do, not at all. A lot of the times, of course, there are situations like that where there are single men where they are, you know, the main breadwinners, and they're looking after their children and their home life at home. There is no denial of that, but obviously what it is that there is this pressure, there is this stigma on women to be able to perform well in everything that they do. The fact that they're going out on the workplace, it is still, and we spoke with this with Soraya yesterday when we were talking about this program, about the fact that even maternity leave is still labelled as maternity leave, with the emphasis being on the mother. And you know, these stigmas need to be addressed and perhaps need to be changed so that it's parental leave rather than, you know, maternal leave. And we're going to be talking about this in a little bit more detail. But definitely what Metin has pointed out, the fact that in, you know, places of politics and religion, we're being underrepresented. Hopefully Ren can enlighten us a little bit, because my next question is, do you think religion plays a part in how women are considered in society, and does this need to be discussed, Ren?
So I think firstly we need to distinguish between the faiths themselves and the interpretations and perceptions of those faiths. So I mean, I'm going by what I know in the Islamic faith, right? So the Islamic faith, it talks very strongly about gender equality. So for example, even the word man and the word woman, they purposely appear as an equal number of times in the Quran, 24 times to be precise. So, you know, with all faiths, there can often be problems with some interpretations, especially in parts of the world that are dominated by men and patriarchy. So an example of this is like in Saudi Arabia, where women were not allowed to even drive, despite no religious evidence to support such a ridiculous notion. So I guess my point is it's the people who twist and distort and in some cases manipulate faith to suit their own agenda. And this is a real problem. So as for kind of, does this need to be discussed? I believe it is being discussed around the world as we speak. There are hundreds of academics and scholars who speak out against those views that don't accurately represent equality. But it is really worth noting that these discussions aren't necessarily from outside the faith, but instead the scholars always argue from within the faith and actually say, you know, references and using the tradition itself to bring these patriarchal interpretations to light. So actually, I think it plays it in a positive way, but it's the people who then tend to twist that tend to give like a negative perception of how women should be treated, really, from my personal kind of perception of Islam specifically.
Yeah, definitely, 100%. Metis absolutely agree. Men deciding what the interpretation of religion is and women's place in that said religion, there seems to be an issue there still, even in this modern day and age. Like you were saying, you know, there was no rhyme nor reason for people in Saudi Arabia or certain countries not to allow their women to drive.
Exactly.
And I sometimes have to communicate with individuals abroad on an education level. And when I tell them that I drive, they find it fascinating. I think it's amazing that a woman drives in this country. Honestly, I've been absolutely like dumbfounded by the reaction. Not in a bad way. They're not negative about it. They're positive about it. But it's an unusual occurrence for women to drive. Something as simple as that. And we're in what century? So, yeah, I mean, these things do need to be addressed. I think 100%. Emine, my next question is quite a heavy loaded question. Due to COVID-19, many of us have turned to social media in order that we can access information, be entertained and discuss certain subjects. You are a founder of one of the main social media platforms. Has sexism, the role of women, women's safety been discussed on your platform, and how have these issues been dealt with?
Right, that's a very long question. Thank you very much for that, Aysen. I think in our community and in our culture, Turkish Cypriot culture, historically, it has been more biased to men, okay? We see this sometimes in the posts that people obviously put on our platform. It may be a joke, or it may be, you know, just a comment that is made. Invariably, it does come from a male, and they see it as funny. Yeah, but obviously as women and as strong women and as many independent women, you know, as we've all discussed already, that, you know, we're multitasking, as are men, okay, we take offence to. And when I say we, as a community, we're taking offence to, because at the end of the day, it's 2021, okay, and a lot of these things I feel should not be said, or at this point in time should not be said any longer. You know, we're a more educated society. More of us, as Fulya said, you know, have got a chance and have chances to go to university to be educated. And the language that we use, or the language that, you know, our members are using when making these comments, is not only derogatory, it's sexist towards men and women. It should be equal on each side. Yeah. Obviously, when we see these posts, and I know, Aysen, you have been involved in a few, and obviously Fulya has been involved in some of these posts as well. You know, everyone has a right to reply, okay? This is an open platform. Everyone has a right to reply. But one of our statements, as you've all seen, is everyone needs to respect each other. We all have different views. We don't all agree with each other, but we need to be respectful of each other. In terms of, you know, safety of women, it's not really talked about, and it's not in the platform. It's not really come up. Only when, and I know you're going to touch on it later, obviously when Sarah Everard was obviously found, I did a post, and I have to say the majority of comments were from women. Men did comment too, but the majority were from women. It's not a subject that I feel we talk about. When I say we as a community are talking about freely or openly. We all know in each community, you know, in each culture, in each religion, there is unfortunately domestic violence to men and women. Okay, not just, and I always share, you know, information for people where they can go to, numbers they can call, you know, if they're in trouble and they need to travel on a train, for example. I've posted this many times. You know, there's a special code they can do. They can get on a train and just escape. Yeah. But we as a community, we don't talk about this. So so up till now, like I say, unless I'm putting it out there, no one is coming forward. We have had one lady personally message us, you know, privately to sort of say that she was in trouble. Okay. We are not experts. At the end of the day, we are a Facebook. We're a community group, but we can then signpost that person. If someone reaches out to us, we can signpost that person to who they need to speak to. And we always say, you know, we're all here day and night. If there's a problem, or if we can help, we can put them in touch with whoever they need to speak to. But I think you know, we need to change the way we think. We need to change our language that we use. Men and women, I'm not, you know, not taking sides, men and women, because sometimes the language that we use is really hurtful, and it is sexist, and it's racist, and it's all of them things. So
yeah, I mean, I want to say something here.
Yes,
although we're saying yes, it's equal for men and women, can I just say something? This is something that I'm admitting now. And I've thought about it for a very long time. And I think we've come to a point where this is very appropriate for me to say, women get a lot of harassment on social media from men.
Yes.
Messaging constantly. I've had to block, I don't know, hundreds and hundreds of men.
Yes.
And when I compare it to my husband's messenger, for example, and my own messenger, there is a marked difference there, to the point where I actually had to physically write my husband's name on my social media so that people could see. Honestly, and it's slightly simmered down, but I still get it because I'm in the public eye. People seem to feel like they know me, maybe because they see me on a regular basis more than I know them. And that's fine. And I try to respond to reasonable requests or reasonable comments, but there are points where it's become extremely inappropriate and I have been harassed. Fortunately for me, I am of a sound mind, well, to a certain extent, where I can handle it. But it's harassment, nevertheless. And we need to address this because I'm not the only woman that suffers this. I tell you, from the youngest girl to the oldest woman of all age ranges, of all occupations. And it's not just women who are housewives at home or, I don't know, like, if people are going to stereotype, it's very highly educated, fully functioning women that are being harassed and then are falling victim to certain things like money laundering, all sorts of things on social media. So we must address this for women's safety, I think, and we need to probably do separate programs on this, but this is a huge issue. And unfortunately so, if I actually screenshot most of the comments that I get, it is unfortunately from the Turkish-speaking community that harass me. It from this country, Cyprus or Turkey, and it's unacceptable, I'm sorry to say, unacceptable for men to feel like they can do that. So although, yes, of course, I'm sure men are harassed as well, it's not to the same level. I disagree if men say that because it's not true. Women get harassment, especially if you're in a certain trade, like I'm in the modelling industry, I will get it even more because of a certain stereotype, a certain assumption created about me. So that is something that you've touched upon. And honestly, I mean, I commend you for it. It's something that does need to be voiced and something that does need to be addressed 100%.
Thank you. Sorry. No, thank you. And look, I just want to echo just the last point that you made about the messages that are sent. You know, we all get these, direct messages or someone wants to send you a request. Because we run this platform, myself, Hassan and Aysen, if someone's messaging us, obviously they might be wanting to reach out or ask us a question or whatever. So obviously I accept their request because it might be something, that they need help with or they have a question. But you are correct. The stuff that we get is really inappropriate. And I don't know why they think it's okay because it's not okay.
It's not. And the thing is it's very easy to hide behind a computer screen or hide behind a phone and harass people. When you see them face to face, and sometimes I've come across these people face to face, they become very embarrassed because they know what they've done is unacceptable. So please, I implore you, teach your youngsters, teach each other, like you said, to be respectful, not to harass. And if you have a differing view, no problem with having an open discussion and disagreeing. There's no problem about that, but don't harass somebody or, insult them. Everybody has a right to an opinion. As long as we're respectful of each other, we can all have differing views. There's nothing wrong with that. And we've got lots of views coming in from the audience, but I am going to go on to Soraya and just ask her the next question because I feel like it's quite relevant to understanding men's psychology as well, so that we do show the male perspective as well on this program. What are the expectations, in your opinion, that are placed on boys and men in our community, Soraya?
Earlier on, I kind of tried to jot some notes down because I wanted to kind of, think about what I was going to say. And I've kind of gone all over the place. But, in terms of the boys within our community, especially within the Turkish community, I'm going to kind of talk from my own personal experience about what it was like for me growing up and living among other, Turkish Cypriot people, British born as well. And I kind of, when we're young and boys and you've got girls, you've got your sons and your daughters. I kind of acknowledge, and I was aware very, very early on, that there was cultural, societal, stereotype expectations that were, if you want, planted on us as individuals, on the boys, on the girls. It's almost like your life would be mapped out. If you were a girl, if you were a boy, there was, there was limits placed on me as a young girl. There was, without doubt, I had limits, and I had to live up to expectations within the Turkish community. And yet I could see that with boys, it was almost like they were kind of being groomed to, go out there, be the provider. The other thing that I kind of noticed, not so much now, thankfully, with sort of the younger generation, but generations gone before, is that the domestic violence, that it was almost acceptable that if your aunt or your mother or a next door neighbor was being abused by their husband or a brother or uncle, it was almost like, well, that's okay, that's what we've got to live with that. It'd be shameful if you try to remove yourself from this abuse. It's like you have to put up with it, because if you go out and you want to live a life and you try to spread your wings, you try to educate yourself, you try to kind of be independent, it was almost like that would bring some kind of shame. And I think for boys, what I would love to see happen is for boys to view women, to respect women, and to respect themselves. And because if they respect themselves, they respect us, and vice versa. It's not just about how boys view girls, but it's how girls view boys. And there has been a change. I have seen a change, but it's been quite slow. And it's a bit like what everyone has said, before, that change needs to happen in order for growth and to see us as future leaders, to see women that they can be CEOs, they can be leaders, they can go out and make a life for themselves, and to not necessarily have imposed on them a sort of negative reputation.
Definitely. I mean, Yusuf, and we've had so many comments, but just on your point, Yusuf has said we need to accept and acknowledge that we had, and in many cases still have, gender bias within the Cypriot community. Sons and daughters are held to different standards, and in many cases it's unjust, unfair, and simply sexist. We need to evolve and change our ways as we move forward as a community. And Metin has put also here, key points, it's the boys and men's own insecurities that's the issue. The pressure that's being put on them, what they have to be, that makes them treat women in a certain negative way. It's true, like man up, be a man, Adamol. It's all of those sayings, really. We've got to allow men to actually show their emotions as well. I think that it's okay. It's okay for a man to cry. It's okay for a man to feel upset or to feel insecure. Man doesn't have to always be the one that goes out there and works, and he's the, there's this perception as well. And I feel women are guilty of this a little bit, where they say, oh, why should the man, why should I pay for the man? I want to, the man should pay for me. It's these sorts of ideals that, we need to change. It has to become more equal so that then we are treated differently as well. So there is a lot there. I mean, thank you very much for all your comments. Thank you, Soraya, for what you're saying. I mean, I think all very justified points. It sort of leads me on to my next question, Fulya. You've been extremely successful in your career. You've qualified with a PhD from Bath University, and now you're a senior commissioning officer within Enfield Council. Have you over the years experienced much in the way of discrimination? And for those that do not understand it, what does discrimination in the workplace and in education look like? So we're not just specifically talking about the Turkish Cypriot community now, we're talking about generally, because obviously this gender inequality is something that you know, is all over the world, like we discussed earlier. So it's not just within our community. Our community is just a reflection of what is out there in the actual world. So what's your experiences, Fulya?
I suppose having been in education for about 10 years, what I would say is I didn't see overt discrimination. I mean, I think I went into a field 30 years ago where it was pretty unknown for any woman to go into, which was the start of genetic engineering and molecular biology. And I was one of the lucky ones to be on the course. I mean, within I would say out of the 25 people that were on the course, there was only 4 women. So it was very much male based. We'd go into the physics department and you were the only woman. Literally, they would just stare at you. You know, it was that kind of environment. But saying that, when I moved on to do my master's and then my PhD, I mean, when I was in Bath, I was in a lab full of men, and they were absolutely fantastic, I have to say, because I think there were so few women in science that they really appreciated. I mean, little titchy me, I'm only 5 foot, so couldn't reach the lab table, so they'd help me out, and you know, it was really, really great, and they were all fantastic, I have to say. And even when I moved on to St Bart's, where I did my postdoc, I mean, it was a kind of more of a gender split between men and women, but again, I didn't see any, apart from, I would say, the fact that we, obviously as researchers, we need to publish work. And one of the things was that obviously you're trying to do your research and to get it published, and your name's to be on that particular paper. And we had issues around kind of our supervisors, potentially our kind of heads, not allowing you to be on the actual kind of article that they're actually writing where you've done the research. And I have to say that came from not only the men but some women as well. So it was quite interesting that there was more discrimination against women, and I think that may be due to the fact that there were so women in science that there was that competition then. I think it's changed quite a lot in the last 30 years. We have a lot more women in these fields, a lot more women doing research. You look at AstraZeneca, I mean, the lead scientists are women on that. In terms of work, I haven't experienced discrimination, apart from the fact that I know you reach a glass ceiling within local authority. If you look across the board, you see that most of the executive directors are men. There's very few women, and very, very few women of color or from our kind of white other groups that are in those kind of positions. I think it's different in law. It's different in probably accountancy, in the finance sector, but certainly in local authority, we have a lot less. I mean, there are lots of women working within Enfield Council, particularly in health and social care. So I haven't experienced that. I mean, within public health, we're pretty much equal in terms of men and women. Probably there's more women than men in that particular area. And I've been very fortunate that I've had really, really good bosses, you know, male bosses who've been absolutely fantastic and have actually encouraged me to do things out of my kind of, I suppose, safe sphere. So they've encouraged me to get on and do things, to try new avenues. So it's been really good. But I have seen discrimination. So we're talking about discrimination, so direct discrimination against an individual person where they've been refused training, or where they've been refused to apply for given no option to apply for a job. And that's happened to women and women of color. It's happened to, I've seen indirect discrimination where, you know, there's been policies in place where you could say that the person, let's say a woman is I wrote it down, I suppose particularly at a disadvantage. For instance, if you're wearing a headscarf and the policy is that there's no headscarves, you shouldn't be wearing it, and that's an indirect discrimination. That hasn't happened, but that could happen in certain workplaces. They won't allow women to wear that, which I think is totally wrong. At the end of the day, you should be allowed to wear what you want. It shouldn't be a policy. There's been victimization. Yes, I mean, people have complained. They have seen harassment, people being harassed. They have seen inequalities. They have voiced it. And I think particularly for women, it's very difficult because it is a very male-dominated place, I think the workplace in particular. And I think if you do complain, you can be seen to be victimized in certain areas. And I have seen it happen, unfortunately. And there has been harassment as well. I mean, we've all heard the case of a little bit of a joking, touching, you know, kind of a bit of innuendo here and there. And it does happen in the workplace, unfortunately. It's a lot better now, but I think years ago it was much more common. It was kind of seen as something that you do. You go to the pub, you know, with your colleagues, and somebody says something, or you know, you go out for lunch and they'll say something to you, and it does happen. I fortunately haven't had that experience. I've been very lucky in that sense, but I know there are women who've experienced it, and probably men as well. I mean, I have to be honest. I saw one guy being bullied at work, and I had to stand up and talk to my boss and say, look, I can't watch someone being bullied. What does that reflect on me? So I actually went and told my boss, who actually confronted this particular person. But it's not done because people like to keep quiet. They're worried about their jobs, they're worried about their positions. So it is difficult. But I think, as I said, I mean, I've been lucky in the sense that I've been able to move on ahead. I've been lucky in terms of education, been able to move forward. I haven't had, as Soraya said, you know, we are told that we're this package. Women can only do this. I went out of the package, but I was very fortunate that my family allowed me to do that. If they hadn't allowed me to do that, I don't know. I mean, I don't know how rebellious I would have been, whether I would have conformed. There is a stereotype that men, you know, they're the big chiefs. They can do what they like. You know, they can have this, have that, you know, they can sleep around, they can, you know, hit women. It's seen as quite normal. I don't know about now. I think things have changed, but having said that, there are still issues in the community. Domestic violence, sexual abuse that we don't talk about, that goes on in the community. So I think, yes, it's hard, but yeah, I mean, we need to address some of these issues, and we need to ensure that our women are empowered, our young girls are empowered. And I think we have to offer a safe space for them, and to say that you can achieve anything. I mean, those boundaries are gone now. I think we're able to do a lot more than we used to. And, you know, if we encourage our young girls to get into education or get into entrepreneurship, you don't have to go into education, but as long as you're able to fulfill your dreams and you're being supported, I think that's important as well.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I totally agree with you, Fulya. I think, of course, in this day and age, people are less likely to talk about it openly, their views, but it still goes on behind closed doors. And unfortunately, actually, within your loved ones, and that's when women, I think, don't speak out, is when one of their loved ones, be it their father, be it their partner, be it their brother, be it their uncle, whoever it is within the family setup, says, you know, you have to conform, you have to do this, or you have to do that. Even if that woman is very forward thinking, even if that woman is very educated, even if that woman is very brave, at that point, they simmer down and they conform to whatever it is that they're being
if you don't have economic independence, you're reliant on your family, what are you supposed to do? You just do what the family wants you to do. Unless you are incredibly rebellious and strong and you want to leave the community or leave your family environment. It is hard.
It's hard. And you know, I think most of us here on this panel have had supportive parents and been lucky enough to have been nurtured in an environment where our parents did support us. But not everybody, like you said, is in that position. And that could be not even because somebody has those beliefs, but like you said, financial constraints or just, you know, fear. You know, a lot of us are second, third, fourth generation now. If we go back to the first generation, you know, moving to a new country, I think we became much more insular and much more narrow-minded than perhaps even abroad, because we had to, you know, adapt to a new system. So it brings a community, also almost shrinks a community to its core, doesn't it? And it's only now that we're starting to sort of unravel and feel confident in ourselves and assimilating and feeling more empowered. So I think all of these factors have an effect. I think what we're saying here is that if you truly feel as a woman, as a young girl, as any individual out there, you know, within our community and even wider, you feel like you're not fulfilling your true potential, or people are sort of putting views on you that you don't quite agree with, you know, there are places that you can go and you can get help and maybe you can get support, because I think as a community now we're becoming more open-minded. I mean, there's lots of comments, and most of the comments, I must admit, are coming from men. So men are our supporters. So it's not like we're saying men don't support us. And I had this conversation with Soraya yesterday. You know, sometimes it's even women upon women. You know, we say we've got this sisterhood when it comes to bigger subjects, but when it comes to smaller subjects, we're not as supportive of each other. So that has to change as well. I mean, gosh, we've got Gul, I'm going to ask you the next question, but before I do, there's so many comments. I don't want to, like, you know, Serhat has said, luckily my parents taught me to see people for people. I'm also lucky to work for a large company who see no gender either. It's a shame this is still a thing in society still. Luckily, I'm surrounded by strong women who've been there, have broken boundaries for the next generation. Fantastic to hear that. Metin Ali has put history is the problem. His story, women have been, his story, yes. Women have been at the forefront of everything for centuries. It's just not reported on because history is written controlled by men. Change who writes and puts the curriculum together, and attitudes will change. And I think Yusuf made the point that Muhammad actually, let's go back up to that because I think that's quite relevant now. He actually made a comment somewhere up here about Muhammad used to clean the house, sew his own clothes, worked with his wife before she proposed to him. So it's in the Quran. It's in the Quran, you know, we were talking about it. I mean, there's so many comments. Thank you very much for people. Edim has put something about women. He's put something about, you know, how we are, let's look back. It's comment. It's hard to walk away from an abusive relationship that people realize it's easier said than done. He's put, so yes, it is very, very difficult. There has been a breakthrough in terms of girls being the best in the fields that they take. We need to ensure women are listened to and platformed into decision-making processes in order that women have the same opportunities to realize dreams, feel safe, and be treated as an equal. There's no excuse for us in 2021 to accept discrimination. Thank you to all the panelists. You are all amazing. Yeah, I mean, these are all valid points. This is supporting men from our community. So we're not doing too badly. But obviously, we've got a long way to go. Gulfidan, you are now ahead of the TCCA and the FF women's groups. What changes, new projects do you plan, and how do you think this will help women and support equality?
So we've got, so for TCCA, we've got some exciting stuff coming up. I think the first thing we're going to do is run a workshop to enhance and empower women. We're also going to have a service where we can support women in welfare benefits, housing issues, debt, employment, training. We're going to create a safe space for any domestic abuse victims. And we're also going to run a really exciting self-defense class, which everyone's welcome to join. For the Football Federation side of stuff, we're going to run a girls tournament in the summer. So that should be fun. That's going to be also in memory of mine, Sultan, and Gulay's mum. So that'll be fun.
Oh, that's lovely. That's really nice. I look forward to it. Obviously, everything, we had these plans, but it's all sort of gone to a standstill a little bit because of COVID, but hopefully we'll be able to get back into it.
Yeah.
Ren, the whole issue of women's safety has been a major topic ever since the Sarah Everard's case hit the headlines. What are your thoughts about women's safety? I mean, I've sort of talked about it a bit to do with social media, and obviously Emine has as well. Do men have a role to play to make women feel safe?
So I think, first of all, what happened with Sarah Everard was deeply traumatic. You know, a woman of similar age to me living in London, it was shocking and disturbing. So, you know, my heartfelt condolences go out to all of her family and friends, because it was a real shock. You know, to people in my generation that were reading the news, it was a really scary, you know, news article, and it's really tragic. It's important that all people feel safe in this society, you know, regardless of their race or their gender. And unfortunately, there have been many cases over the years where concerns around the safety of women have arisen. I think Dr. Fulya also provided a few other examples of women, not only with Sarah Everard. And since Sarah Everard's death, for example, there was a surge in downloads of women's safety apps. And also, I think the government implemented, they wanted to put in place some more measures, such as having more undercover police officers in clubs and pubs, better CCTV coverage, and enhanced street lighting. Sorry. So I think that's all really, really good in terms of, reacting to some of that news. But I personally know friends that they just don't feel comfortable going out. Female friends don't feel comfortable going out late at night on their own, especially in the Turkish community. And I would say to all women just to continue to be vigilant when they're out, notify friends and family, where they are, if they feel uncomfortable as well. And even in a cab, you can share your location if you don't feel safe, or you just want to make sure people know where you are. So there are things that can make people obviously feel a bit safer where you can. But men also, they do have a role to play. It's important that they understand that if a woman is weary of a man late at night in a car park, for example, they shouldn't take it personally. Secondly, speaking out against misogyny is not the sole responsibility of women, but actually men speaking out against it is arguably more effective. It's that element, and I think this is what most of the women on the panel were talking about, it's that element of respect that, the importance of men respecting women. It comes from their upbringing, their friends, their surroundings, and that really needs to be embedded here. And I think together we need to make it clear that it's not socially acceptable to just catcall a woman as they walk down the street and inappropriately touch someone without their consent. Some conscientious men even feel uncomfortable with this conversation, but they need to be more comfortable with being uncomfortable, because women have felt uncomfortable for many years and have had to live with it. I do also believe that, I think mentioned about the media, but that perception of women in marketing campaigns and in the media hasn't helped, in that women are being objectified to sell, almost anything from chocolates to toothpaste, but even those videos, the music videos you see of women, and instead really we should be telling men and overall society that women just aren't just physical objects. So if men learn to respect women, and I'm not saying this applies to all men, because most men do, as we've seen in the conversation and the comments, but I really believe we wouldn't be facing this issue of safety in women at least as much as we do now, if that sort of element of respect was really embedded in those men. So
100%. Yeah, I 100% agree. Obviously, we're not stereotyping all men, not at all. But there are issues here. And you're right about, objectifying women, just to sell products and things. And I think with music videos, I think with advertising, it's getting better. I think with the modelling industry, it's certainly getting better. But there are still some big issues out there. And I think when it comes to the music industry, it's still a huge problem. And the videos that these youngsters watch and what women do, but in a sense, we need to give responsibility to men, we need to give responsibility to ourselves and maybe say no to certain things. I mean, I've had to say no to certain jobs where I just feel it's not appropriate for me to do that. And I think we have to make those choices. But obviously, some women are living on the breadline, and it's not a choice, and they just have to accept whatever they're given. So there's that as well. So I appreciate that. But really, we have to make these choices. We have to make the right choices. We have to take responsibility for our social media. I do look at some of our young girls on social media, and I do think about the intentions that they're giving out. Who is their target audience? Are they showing parts of their body because they're proud of themselves, or are they doing it to get attention off of boys? And then you open yourself to an array of things, because you can just start messaging someone. It only starts with a little message, and that person could end up being a narcissist, a controlling person, and ruin your whole life, and you could look back when you're 40 and regret that decision that you made to, you know, partner up with a certain individual. And it all starts from one image that you portray on social media. It's as simple as that. So women and young girls need to be very aware of that and what image they portray and why they're portraying it. You can still look sexy, you can still look glamorous, you can still look beautiful, but still have your dignity and have respect for your body. And I think Soraya is going to talk about that a little bit in a minute when we go on to our final sort of question. Let's go, ask Emine now. Does KibrisWorldWide have any plans in the pipeline related to opening up a discussion role in society, the perception of women, the safety of women?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, because of what's been going on, like the news, like we've mentioned, Sarah, and also not just Sarah Everard, which is, as Ren said, it's an awful case. There are men and women being murdered, gone missing every day, and we all see them. But we need to have these conversations. We, as a community, need to learn to talk about these topics, like, women's safety or, equality. We have got, amazing men and women in our community, really strong women, strong men, and we need to celebrate. We need to learn to celebrate each other. We need to learn to support each other. We need to have these conversations, and like I said earlier, but when we are having these conversations, we need to learn how to respond to each other without swearing at each other, without being derogatory, because we don't seem to be able to have a serious conversation about serious topics without having a go at each other. I mean, you've seen them, we have to police them because people, they start swearing and calling each other names. Have a serious conversation. It's enough, talk about whatever you want to talk about. Get your point across. We need to educate each other. We all can learn from each other. None of us are experts on everything or know everything. These are why these platforms are here. It's to build communities, it's to make friends, it's to, reach out to wider communities. We are not living in a secular society. We don't just exist on our own. We are in a massive world, okay? We're all mums, dads, brothers, sisters, sons, daughters. We're all together. We're all doing this together. For all this COVID, everyone's like, we're all in it together. Yeah, we are all in it together. But in order to do that, we need to stand side by side, whether you're male, whether you're female, whatever your views are, politically or whatever else. First of all, it's about humanity. And this is what, we do need to open these conversations. So yes, I would like to have these conversations. I would like our community to feel they can have these conversations freely. Say what you want to say. Don't be scared to voice your opinion. It's your opinion. You have a right to that opinion. People have no right to shut you down. So, yeah, we need to have these conversations.
100%, I think so. And, and I do find, I have noticed, unfortunately, sometimes when a woman opens a conversation, I do feel like they're more attacked than when a man does, even on social media. And good for those strong women out there who continue to put their opinions across. There's nothing wrong with putting your opinion across. It's just we have to be respectful to each other, like you said, and respect each other's space and each other's views. Like, look at us. There's 6 of us on this panel and we've not been disrespectful. I'm sure there are lots of things that we may disagree upon or agree upon. We've had a civilized conversation and we've talked about very taboo subjects. We talked about all sorts of things. So really, when you're respectful to each other, it can happen. You can have an adult, mature conversation, and hopefully for the new generations coming up, we can be a good example to them. So definitely, I mean, this was very much needed. I mean, on a final note, Soraya, can you tell us how we can get to a point where women and men are truly equal in the workplace and in relation to pay?
I think first of all we have to kind of acknowledge that a disparity does exist in workplaces. That has to be acknowledged in order for something to be done. And when you acknowledge it, you need to identify it and then make those changes and then empower women. And I think Fulya said it, and other panel members have said it. It's about policies, it's about jargon, it's about terminology, and it's about, I think, the desire and the motive to want to change, to want to bring equality into the work environment.
Yeah, definitely. Bill, what is the way forward as well? We'll ask you as well, because obviously your experience with the workplace.
I think the way forward is just working together. It's just having a mutual, respectful understanding, and just being treated equally.
Exactly. I think where there's a will, there's a way. Obviously, you know, it is difficult. And we are going to come across lots of different things. And sometimes people make mistakes. They say things and then afterwards they think, why did I say that? That wasn't, you know, the right thing to do. It's accepting, you know, like sometimes on social media when people make comments, just putting your hands up and saying, actually, okay, what I said was a bit disrespectful. I apologise.
That's it.
Then everything will be fine. You know, sometimes it just takes one apology and people will be forgiving, but they go on and they go on and they dig a bigger hole, and you just think, just simmer down, be calm. We've got lots of comments. I want to read off, because Aisha Ismail, she wrote lots of things. So I'd like to see a female's comment, because she's been supporting us all the way through the program. Thank you very much. Seeing all these strong women within our community makes me so proud, and hope that it does reach out to all women in our community to speak up and know that they can get help. They can stand up and voice their rights. It's so important to teach this to our children. We need to bring more awareness for equality for women. I think that's amazing. Thank you ever so much, Aisha. She's been supporting us all the way through the program and making comments. Metin also, my daughter studied neuroscience at university and moved away. It was the best opportunity for her to realize she can do anything she wants to do and not be limited by the man in her life. Her dad, oh, bless him. That's brilliant. Aisha as well put, absolutely heartbreaking. I think we were talking about the case, you know, that was on the news. Metin Ali, women and men will never be safe until we have mutual respect for all and the value of life. No woman should feel unsafe when she is out at night, and it's man's duty to ensure a woman knows and understands she's safe in any given circumstance. Well, it's everyone's duty, and I think we need to be aware and put things into place like Ren suggested, where, you know, you have a friend know where you are, you know, get the registration of the Uber that you call upon, you know, put these things into place, try and use a common sense. Unfortunately, there is a lot of unstable people out there. Anything could happen. It's unfortunate. So I think in these current times, we do need to be aware of our safety. Maybe we could actually do a program where we could talk about all the different steps that you could take to ensure your safety when you're out there. Obviously, women shouldn't and men shouldn't feel unsafe when they go out there. But unfortunately, such is sometimes we do feel unsafe. Ren, I don't know if you want to add anything to that comment.
Oh, can you hear me now? Yeah. I think the emphasis is obviously not just women, it is men. And I think when I have been out by myself, you know, I've been working late at night and I'm coming back home and I have to walk through an area that was considered unsafe, for example, I would always be, I would text my parents to tell where I am. If I was in an Uber, I'd send my location. So it's just really taking, where you do feel unsafe, just take those precautions and make sure that you're in an area where you're limiting that chance of, you know, not feeling that safe. So, you know, I think for everyone, it applies to everyone. The Sarah Everard's case was awful, and, you know, no one should ever have to experience that. But just be vigilant, you know, make sure you're always with people where you can be. And just make sure that you take precautions when you're not, and hopefully you'll be in a position where, you know, you will always feel safe, because no one should ever feel unsafe. That's the worst feeling in the world.
100%. We've actually gone over time by about 9 minutes. Unfortunately, I won't be able to go through everybody's comments, but thank you very much to the audience for participating in the program. I'd like to end on Ertanç Bey's comment. He's put, part of fighting sexism and violence against women is speaking out. I haven't heard much outrage at Turkey's decision to leave the Istanbul Convention, which facilitates countries fighting violence against women. I don't know if there is anybody in our panel that would like to make a comment about that. Is anybody knowledgeable enough to talk about that? I mean, obviously it was quite shocking. Fulya, is there anything you'd like to say about that?
Well, from my understanding, they've left the convention, but my understanding is that in terms of women's rights, there's still equitable rights in Turkey for women. I know that particular convention. There's quite a few other countries that have left that convention, but again, we need to have a more kind of open debate around it and what is going on politically, I think, in Turkey, and where I suppose where the actual pressures are coming from in terms of, I know lots of people have views around Erdogan, but I think there's a lot more to it than just him making the decision. There's a lot of misogynistic party leaders out there, and I think there's that's kind of influencing what's going on in Turkey at the moment.
Yes, definitely, 100%. But obviously, all of these things need to be discussed, and I've thoroughly enjoyed myself, ladies. It's been so informative and valuable for our community and our viewing audience out there. I'd like to thank the panel for giving their time and coming on to my program, and for our audience for their comments. It's been absolutely amazing. Hopefully we can take some positives from this and move on in our community and the wider world as well. That's it from us. Have a very good evening from Euroginch TV. Good night.
Biliyor musun? Erken rezervasyon başladı. Yazın en renkli fırsatları CyprusParadise.com'da. %40, %50 hatta %60'a varan kaçırılmaz indirimler. Erken rezervasyon yap, uçak bileti fiyatına paket tatili al. Uygun fiyata Kıbrıs tatilinin adresi CyprusParadise.com. Zaman akıp gitmeden acele edin. Bir bakmışsınız yaz gelmiş. Cyprus Paradise. Tatiliniz bizimle güvende.
Kalitenin, güvenin, hızlı teslimatın adresi Ancon Furniture. Ancon Furniture ailesi olarak yeni ürünler ile hizmete devam etmekteyiz. Yeni model koltuk takımlarımız, yatak mekanizmaları bir dokunuş ile açılıp bir dokunuş ile kapanabilmektedir. Bir dokunuş ile açtığımız yatak mekanizmasının yatak çarşafı kullanıma hazır, serili olarak içinden çıkmaktadır. Yıl sonuna kadar herhangi bir koltuk takımı alan her müşterimize akıllı sehpa hediyemizdir. En iyi ürün, en iyi fiyat. Sadece Ancon Furniture'da. Bize uğramadan karar vermeyin. En iyisini biz yapana kadar daha iyisi yok.